What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the R31 build. It is very late and it is very, very cold, so I'm very rugged up, but I've had a lot of interest in this Defi Advance copy that I'm going to install in the car. So much interest that I decided to pretty much dedicate one entire episode to showing what it is, what's involved, and why and how, or suppose, yeah, why it's good to run it. Basically, this is the Defi Advance ZD copy. These are Chinese eBay copy of the real one. Obviously you get what you pay for, but I will say that we have installed one onto V80, the twin turbo LS powered Land Cruiser that we built, and thus far it has been really good. We have double checked it with other gauges and it's been quite accurate. That being said, difference is this is the one that I'm installing. It came in this sort of box. I bought this off a mate for like $80, which was really good. I had originally planned to put that in the Crusader, but it's now going into the R31 because the Crusader is going to be a fair way off. This is the one that we put into V80. As you can see, it's a different box. Seems to be a different copy, and it has a different control box, as you can see there in the picture. That's what the control box in that one looks like, and it is physically very large compared to the control box that came with this setup. So the other difference is, so this is the control box that came with this setup. It is literally about probably a third to a quarter of the size of the control box that came with the other one. So hopefully, I'm hoping this one that I've got here is also just as good as the one we put into V80. I really am hoping. So I guess it's going to be one of those things where it's just going to be time's going to tell. We'll just have to see how it goes. So the biggest issue I have with this setup, which we didn't have with the one we bought for the V80, is that a lot of these sensor wires are quite short. So it comes with all of the sensors that you pretty much need to run a pretty basic setup. It does have, it's got, yeah, there's a lot of provisions for this little unit. There are a lot of things that you can put into it if you want to, if you want extra stuff. Me personally, I just want pretty basic stuff. Things like oil pressure, water temp, oil temp, boost, things like that, just general protection for your engine. Things I can keep an eye on, especially one of the biggest reasons these things are so good to run for me in this particular instance is that I'm running a Microtech LT8. This is my ECU. Microtech, the LT8 is an old computer. Microtech, by rule, they're not as advanced as a lot of other ECUs. So like using a very old ECU that doesn't have provisions for, I suppose, oil pressure drop or anything like that. Like a lot of these new ECUs these days have provisions to protect your engine in such a case of something like that happening. But here we are talking about a $300 motor. So I'm not about to go spend $1,500 on a new ECU to run my $300 motor. This Microtech is going to do exactly what I want. And with this Defi Advance ZD copy, I'll be able to keep an eye on all of those things so that I can, if something happens, I can manually shut it down. So, as I was saying, the sensor wires that came with this kit are way shorter than the ones that came with the kit that we put into V80. When we put that kit into V80, we could put this little control box inside the cab, no issues at all. All of the sensors would reach, that was fine. With this one, my sensors are too short. A lot of the sensors on the car, I will not be able to get the wires back into the cabin. So, what I've had to decide to do is to put this little control box inside the engine bay, which is not a huge deal. It just means it's going to be another thing in the engine bay. It's going to look ugly. It is what it is. Still going to do the job. Hopefully it's fairly weatherproof. Shouldn't get too wet anyway. I don't really plan on flogging the car in the rain too much. Alright, so that's more or less the differences between these and that sorted, and explaining why I want to run it. So I guess now I'll start showing you what's in the box, what it actually comes with. So I apologise that most of the sensors are already installed in the car. I also do very much apologise for the state that the car is in at the moment and how messy it is. Just nearing the final stages of the build, and it's just getting to that point where everything's sort of half done until it starts. So sorry about that. So sensors are in the car. Can't really show you all that, but as you can see, it's got boost sensor, and that's the wire for the boost sensor. This is the control box. So you can read the control box here. We've got from top to bottom, hopefully this camera will focus. It's a real pain lately. I'm really getting the shits with it. So at the top we've got speed, tacho, water temp, oil temp, air and fuel, fuel pressure, turbo, and then oil pressure. Oil temp and oil pressure. So basically what I plan on running is water temp, oil temp, fuel pressure, turbo, and oil pressure. I don't really need to run tacho or speed because I still have stock cluster in the car, which still should work fine. That's what I plan on running. The air fuel, I'm pretty sure is just a narrow band. I don't think that's a wide band. It does not come with a sensor to run air fuel. That is like a separate thing if you want to. So that's the control box, which essentially controls everything. It comes with another wire that you link the control box to the actual gauge face. So this is the gauge face which you mount in the car. There are all sorts of different settings which I'll show you once I get it wired in and powered up. I can show you all that. But yeah, so it's an all-in-one gauge. Pretty sure across the top here is like a shift light. It's pretty cool what you can do with it. We have had a bit of fun in the Cruiser with what you can actually program into it. So that's the actual gauge face that it comes with. So for the gauge face you have an out to the control box. Then it also comes with this, which is just your power, earth, and ignition. So that's pretty simple, just like any other gauge really. Just you got power, earth, ignition. There we go, focus. Power, earth, ignition, just like any other gauge. So those are your two plugs that pretty much go to this. There's also other plugs in it, which are for, I'm pretty sure there's a few other sensors you can wire in. It also displays volts. This gauge also displays volts. It just takes volts from your power to the gauge. So there's no extra sensors or anything you have to wire in for that. It does show volts. And this is the actual little, this is the other thing that goes to the gauge. You just mount this inside as well. This is just the little, this is all the controls for the gauge face. So there's a few buttons and some toggles. This is how you just navigate and set and do all sorts of stuff. So a great thing with these is you can actually set them to alarm. You can set them with parameters for maximum and minimum. So you can have it alarm for overboost, you can have it alarm for oil pressure drop, you can have it alarm for fuel pressure drop, water temp increase. So you can set alarms for all that, which is really, really nice. Actually, the other thing it does come with is a pyro. So exhaust gas temp. I'm assuming that might be one of the ones that goes directly to the unit. Either way, I'm not going to be running that sensor either because I have no use for exhaust gas temp. So yes, you can set it to alarm, which means that you don't actually need to display everything on the face because you can set this to how much you want it to display. So if it gets too cluttered, you can take some stuff out and it will still just alarm if it goes underneath. So things like, I suppose, water temp, you don't really always have to be watching it. You can just set an alarm for it. That way, if it creeps up, it'll alarm. Same with oil pressure. So, pretty cool that you can do all that. So that's essentially the kit. Pretty easy. So these are just all of the leftover wires from the sensors that I've already installed on the car. And that is just the mounting hardware. There's a few different ways you can mount the actual face. So it comes with all the hardware to do that. So, that's more or less it. So I'm just going to go through at the moment tonight. My plan of attack is to actually get all of the sensors that I have on the motor wired up to the back corner where I plan on putting this control box and have them all wired into the control box ready to go, and then in the morning I will mount the face and actually wire it all in and show you and power it up. So I've already run through the firewall this cable that connects the box to the face. So that's already been run through the firewall, ready to go. And the other end of it comes up just above the steering wheel there, and that's where I'm going to mount the gauge. So here on the motor I've got my fuel pressure, which goes on just before the regulator, before the return. So that'll give me accurate fuel pressure to what's in the rail. So that's my fuel pressure sender. I've got my boost sender, which is here, which is teed off. It's the same reference from the manifold for the boost and the fuel reg. I've also got down in the sump, for those of you who've been following the build for a long time, when I did the sump, I actually welded in a bung for my oil temperature, so I've got a really nice, accurate reading on my oil temperature right in the bottom of the sump there. So I've got that sensor down there. My oil pressure is in factory position. I figured that if I have a aftermarket oil pressure sensor, I have not much use for the factory one, so I decided to just take the factory one out and put that one in. And then my water temp is actually just on an adapter in the top of the radiator hose. So that's my oil temp, and I believe that is essentially all of the sensors I have on the car. So I'm just going to wire all of them into this box now. So there you have it, guys. I've wired all the sensors back to the control box, which I've had to mount up here. Obviously pretty messy. I've done sort of as neat as I can. As you can see, I've coiled up all the excess here and zip tied it up. So not an ideal situation having the control box in the engine bay like this, but the other option was to extend the short sensors, which the wires on them are very, very small gauge, and I was just not interested in extending all those wires at all. So this is the way it's ended up having to be, which is, yeah, it sucks, but it is what it is, as long as it works. So just off that issue alone, I would recommend if you can get one of the ones in the more orangey coloured box, like we've got over there. They do on the eBay listing usually show the box, so if you can find one of those, I'd get one of them just because the sensor wires are longer. And yeah, we know that one works, so can vouch for that one. Can't really vouch for this one as of yet. Alright, so this is what it looks like when you put the little mount together. It's got a little mount, you can slide it up and down, and has a little base plate which you can put screws through, and it also comes with this double-sided tape for the mount. So what I'm going to do is, it's got this little square cutout in the center. I'm just going to punch that out and use that to mount my little control module. And as you can see in the R31, there is a lovely nice little place here right on top of the column where I can mount that, and from my seating position it is just the perfect position really. It doesn't cover anything. It's going to be really nice, but you could also flip it and mount it up high. I like the idea that you can mount it up around here. The only thing I don't like about mounting it up here is that I still have to run wires. I still have to run the cabling somewhere, and it's just going to be out in the open and in the way and annoying. If I mount it down here, it's easy for me just to sneak the cable straight down there under the steering column. And yeah, it's a really nice spot to have it. So then when I get my AFR, the thing is, the AFR gauge that I'm buying, I'm not planning on leaving in this car forever, so it doesn't particularly matter where it gets mounted, because it's only going to be temporary. So I plan on using it pretty much just transferring it through cars as I need to for changes in tunes and that sort of thing, and mucking around. So that's what I plan on doing with that. So anyway, I'm going to clean this up and mount this up. So there you have it, guys. That's where it's going to be mounted. That's where it's going to sit from my seating position, which is this is about where my eyes are. That's quite good. Doesn't cover anything really important. You can see everything else that I need to see in the cluster. So that's great. It seems pretty strong. That double-sided tape that it comes with is fine. And I've put my little controller just down there on the dash there, so I can just get my hand up there behind the indicator stalk and do whatever I need to do. And that's where it's going to be done. So pretty much the only thing left to do from here is just to wire in the battery. There's a battery, earth, there's an ignition, and there's also a light. So we'll wire that to your lights, obviously. So I'm not going to do that tonight because I'm not going to get underneath the dash at the moment. I'm going to do that in the morning. So see you guys then for that. We are back, guys. It is morning and it is way warmer than it was last night, and I'm feeling way better. So it's time to crawl under this dash and connect up this little gauge duva thing, hickey. So as you can see here, this is the little power wire that goes to the actual unit. You've got red, black, white and yellow. So red is constant power, black is earth, yellow is actually illumination, so that's for your lights, and white is for ignition on. So as you can see in all this bird's nest, I've actually got all the wires that I need except for the illumination. I haven't traced a wire that connects to the lights as of yet. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to connect it all except for the illumination, and then I'm just going to see what it looks like with the illumination on and off, because I've got a feeling it's going to be one of those things that you just always want on. So I'm going to check that first. If it's not something I always want on, I will then probably chase a actual light wire, or I will put a switch in for the light on the unit. But if it is something that I always want on, I will just tap the ignition and illumination together so that they just both come on when the car gets turned on. So that's all I'm going to do here. Just going to solder this up. It's going to be a pain, especially because this is so short, it's right up here. But anyway, it is what it is. And that's what I'm working with. So I've got the ones that I want to get soldered at the moment, just soldered up. I've just left the ignition one not soldered yet, it's just twisted. And I've left the illumination just off that, because I'm just going to try twist them together and see how it goes for the gauge when it comes time to turn it on. And I'll just slide the heat shrink up over those two so they don't, you know, start a fire or do something funny. Just soldering in the car as well. I always just use an old oven tray or something. Just stops you from getting solder on the carpet because that stuff never comes out. So that's just a little tip for that one. So it's just time now to chuck a fuse in the inline fuse there that I've got for it. I'm just going to chuck a 10 amp fuse in it for now and leave the ECU disconnected. I will put a 20 amp fuse in it for when I connect the ECU and the injectors to it. But for now I'm just going to undo the spade bit which connects the ECU and injectors, and I'm just going to chuck a 10 amp fuse in it, and that should be fine just to get this started up and have a bit of a play with it. Why I'm doing that is because I've only got 10 amp fuses at the moment. I've got to go get a 20 amp fuse from town, and I'm not going to go into town just yet. I'll do that after. So battery is connected, fuse is in. Time to hit the key, see what this bad boy looks like when it's turned on. There we go. Very cool. So that's what it looks like when it's turned on. And now I'm going to have to read the instructions to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do about it, but with it, and then I'll give you guys a bit of a tour. I suppose I probably should have did that earlier. Probably should have read the instructions prior and been more prepared. But anyway, that's alright. So before I go too far into the instructions, I thought I should just check the illumination situation. So basically, the illumination, see how it illuminates those two buttons. It also illuminates all that little control panel there. And without it, the screen's actually just a little bit brighter. So it'll probably be a bit easier to see when it's off. So for that reason, I'm not going to hardwire it. So I'll either wire that to the lights if I can find a source from the lights under the dash. If not, I'll hardwire it to a switch, which I'll put just here so that I can switch it on and off the same way I had my gauges in here before. So just thought I'd check that before I went too far into the actual thing. But when you start looking at like how small these little wires are down here, you start to realize just how much current draw it doesn't have. So like even these two with the illumination, actually just me touching both of them, it draws enough current to light that up. So funny like that. Anyway, I'm gonna, I'll finish this off a little bit, and then I'll have a look at how this goes. Alright, so got pretty lucky. Obviously because mine is a base model, but in here I just had blanks. So I pulled some of them blanks out. There is a plug in the body loom, which is obviously meant to go to one of these buttons. We're in a non-base model spec car, and I figured that plug has got to have lights in it, right? Because every other button has illumination when they turn the lights on. So one of those plugs has got to be lights, and sure enough, one of them is that one just there. So I can wire me illumination into the back of that wire, and that way this will just turn on with my lights, and that's happy days. I sort of like that. I like that it's a bit standard. That's cool. I do like hardwiring stuff into switches because that way you're not messing with any other wiring in the car. So it's cool that that is just a blank plug that's not going anywhere. So that's alright. Oh, don't you just love how neat and tidy wiring can be? Anyway, I've used green for the illumination because it's a different color to any other color I've used down there, which sort of makes sense. As for this end, what I'm going to do is actually use these power takeoffs. This is another little purchase I got off Wish for pretty much nothing. These are pretty cool. I don't generally like using them for anything really important, but for things like illumination on a gauge, it's going to be fine. So all it is you use that, and you use that to splice into the takeoff wire, and then you close it down, and if the camera will focus, so it slots that wire into that slot there, and then once that's closed, this end, which I'll put on the green cable, this spade, focus camera, you piece of junk, what a pain. Alright, well this spade that you can only see that's a big blur actually inserts onto the back of the power takeoff. So once that's closed, oh look at that, focus is fine. The spade goes in there, so that's all it is. So they're kind of cool, I suppose. I'll give it a go. Should be fine. There we go, spade. So that's what the power takeoff sort of looks like when it's finished and together. Pretty simple, pretty good idea. Just not super reliable, but as I said, for literally just illumination on a gauge, it's going to be fine. And now, when I turn on my lights, boom, lights up, lights off. Awesome stuff. Alright, so I'm not going to go too deep into how to set this thing up because there's no way that I can really explain it in a way that's not just going to be confusing. But the instructions are quite easy to follow, and you can just go through and set all your parameters for when you want it to alarm on high or low inputs. And yeah, as you can see, you got here, we've got volts, air, fuel, turbo, fuel pressure, exhaust temp, which I'm not using all of those. And I don't really need to see all of those all the time. I've set alarms for overboosting over 10 pound. I've set alarms for volts if they drop less than 10 volts. And I've set alarms for fuel pressure if it drops less than, I think, 2.7 bar or close to that. That's your tacho and speed. I'm not really going to use that much anyway because I've got my standard tacho and standard speedo there, so not a big deal for me. And that's what I'll keep this on. That's my oil temp, water temp, and oil pressure, which all have alarms as well, respectively. So, it's a pretty cool little unit. I'm pretty happy with it. You can change the brightness of it and all that sort of stuff, so yeah. It's sort of a fair bit cheaper and easier and way less clutter than having a separate gauge for all of these things on your dash, which is what I had before. I had that 3 gauge cluster which I just took out, so pretty happy with this setup. So I'm just going to tidy this under the dash, get all that sorted. So that was the Defi Advance install, and as I was saying, it's good for protection of your engine, especially if you've got a fairly budget engine and you run on a really expensive ECU, or if you're running a standard ECU still. Pretty good thing to have. So that's been this video. Like I said, I just had enough interest in it that I decided I'd make an entire video on this setup. I'll pretty much, after the one we've put in the Cruiser, and if this one works out alright, I pretty much will be putting one of these in just about every car I build from here on out, just because it's so easy. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope it answered all your questions about the system. If there's anything else you'd like to ask, shoot me a message. And I'll see you on the next episode, where hopefully we are starting this thing up. So keep peeled for that. And I suppose that'll be a telltale sign of how accurate this gauge is. It is reading at the moment oil temp 15 degrees and water temp 21 degrees. I'd assume that's just because oil temp's in a nice cold engine block and water temp is in a not as cold radiator hose. So anyway, there's no fluids in it yet. We'll find out when I get some fluids in this thing and start it up how accurate this gauge is going to be. So thanks for watching, guys. Catch you on the next one.